Greetings, everyone. Thank you for attending today's session, Credit Card Reconciliation in One Click. Although you all presently aren't customers, we have a compelling story to share about how SAP Concur and one of our partners, Pivot Payables, together made great strides for our customer, Vantage Partners. Our presenters today are Carolyn Conroy, who is a Director of Financial Operations at Vantage Partners, and Denise Davert, Vice President of Marketing at Pivot Payables. I'll now pass this over to Denise.
Thank you so much, Karen, and thank you to our audience for taking some time to spend with us today. First, for a little bit of framework here, there are essentially 5 aspects related to credit card accounting. It starts, of course, with the expense report, includes reconciling the reports to the card statement, and typically involves reminding cardholders to submit their expense reports. The last 2 activities are the accrual for the unmatched transactions, and finally, the correcting entries for the final accounting once the expense report is submitted. PivotEQ and Concur Expense work together to address the complete process. We will start our webinar today with our success story and hear how Vantage Partners is using both products to create their credit card accounting. With that said, it is my pleasure to introduce Carolyn Conroy from Vantage Partners. Carolyn is going to take us through her reconciliation process both before and after implementing PivotEQ. Thanks so much for agreeing to share your story with us today, Carolyn. First up, would you please tell us a little bit about Vantage and your role at the company?
Sure, I'm happy to be here. Vantage Partners is a training and consulting firm based out of Boston, and we help companies better manage their critical business relationships. We are in many different industries, including finance, pharma, manufacturing, technology, and energy. And I'm the Director of Finance, and I've been with the firm for almost 30 years.
And Carolyn, what was credit card reconciliation like before PivotEQ?
So I've been involved in the expense process since day one. And over the years, we've had anywhere from 20 to 70 cardholders. And we issue cards to our travelers. We also issue cards to our IT department, our marketing and sales department, and our office management team. So back in the day, I would be handed a summary sheet and a pile of original expenses, or original receipts rather. And then I would match the summary sheets against the Amex bill. And this could easily take me 20 hours a month. And we now are with Pivot, and we've been with you guys since 2016, and it's made a big difference in our process.
Thank you. Can you walk us through the start of that old process to reconcile the American Express transactions?
Sure. So we would get our American Express bill, and then I would go into Concur, and I would run a report that showed me unsubmitted and unassigned transactions. So unsubmitted meant a cardholder had moved a charge to an expense report, but they had not submitted the report. Unassigned meant the cardholder had used the card, but they had done nothing with it.
And what were the steps in the process once you had identified the cardholders?
So once we identified the cardholders, I would cut and paste all of the information from the Concur report, and I would send individual emails to the cardholders asking them to please submit their expenses. I would do this again a week later. If anyone was still on the list, I would cut and paste, send them an email, ask them again to please submit their expenses. On week 3, if they were still on the list, I would involve a manager or a partner and see if I could get a little forward motion that way. And week 4, if people were on the list, we would involve HR at that point.
And of course, the last step is always to update the accounting system, right?
Exactly.
This slide shows the before and after scenarios for you between the manual process and PivotEQ. What were the differences between the 2 processes?
In a worst case scenario, I could have up to 500 unsubmitted charges. and the people just were not responsive to my emails. Once we started with Pivot, you can see that the number of unmatched transactions dropped dramatically. The emails would come from Pivot and not from me in finance. And we worked with Pivot to set up our emails in the same cadence. So week 1 and 2, a cardholder gets an email and our expense processor is copied. Week 3, I'm copied. And week 4, again, HR is copied. And I am very, very rarely copied anymore. The response to these email prompts has been great.
So the combination of Concur Expense and PivotEQ has resulted in significant improvements. Can you please summarize the benefits that you're seeing now?
Sure. We've completely eliminated the manual process. When I receive the Amex bill, I upload it to Pivot, and within seconds, I can see matched and unmatched. And again, once I upload it, that begins the email prompts to the travelers. And the emails come from Pivot, not from me. And the information in the email is everything that I was manually cutting and pasting from Concur. And it has a link to everyone's Concur page. And right here, we've eliminated a step for the travelers, and we've seen a lot of behavioral changes because of that. At the end of the month, I go into my Pivot dashboard, I hit one button to reconcile, and then I'm ready to upload the next month's Amex statement. And given that we're in the relationship business, one of the biggest benefits for us has been the improved relationship between finance and our cardholders.
Thanks so much, Carolyn.
Thank you.
Now let's take a look at the role that PivotEQ is playing in this process. PivotEQ uses the credit card statement along with the expense reports to reconcile and create the accounting. The expense reports import automatically into Pivot about every 15 or 20 minutes and are compared in real time to the credit card statement. As the comparisons run, PivotEQ builds matched and unmatched lists. Matched consist of transactions on an expense report that are also on the current card statement, and unmatched are those yet not submitted on an expense report. PivotEQ will send automatic email reminders to cardholders with unmatched transactions and continue those email reminders throughout the month. Finally, at the statement due date, the accounting is created for the ERP. Now let's take a look at PivotEQ in action. PivotEQ supports both corporate cards and business cards, as well as multiple card programs. You'll see here that I have one American Express program. If I had additional card programs, they would each be represented in their own row. What we're seeing here is I have uploaded my March statement, and essentially in real time, what is matched and what is unmatched. You can see that we have 98 transactions that have been matched between an expense report and our March statement. That leaves us with 13 transactions that are not yet matched. So I'll open up our entire statement balance, which includes all matched and unmatched. And on the left-hand side, you'll see our card holders. Each card holder has a status symbol that indicates if they've submitted transactions against our March statement. Allison here and Charles with the red circles, that means that they have not submitted any transactions associated with their particular card against our March statement. Charles here with the yellow triangle and Debbie and George down below, this indicates that they have submitted at least one transaction for their card. They have at least one transaction yet remaining to be submitted on an expense report. And Corey and David, George, James and Janice down there at the bottom with the green circles, that indicates that they have submitted all of the transactions against this March statement. Now, what PivotEQ is going to do is use these status symbols to indicate whether an email reminder should be sent. So Alice, so there are red circles and our yellow triangles. Those folks are going to get email reminders. People with the green circle are not. So now we'll pop over and look at a couple of our email reminders. PivotEQ comes pre-configured with 4 different reminders, which customers can use as is. They are ready to go, can certainly edit those or create new reminders. So let's open up our first reminder. Kind of going back to Carolyn's cadence, she sent out multiple emails throughout the month. So this is meant to be the first reminder. Its trigger or the event that's going to cause this reminder to go out is based in this case on the statement end date. You'll remember that my statement is for the month of March. We're going to send this just 2 days after the end of that period. So the 2nd of April is when this reminder would go out. It's early in the month. We're just going to send it to the card holder. We're not going to copy or blind copy anyone at this point. Here is our reminder subject line. And now we'll open up our email. You'll see that our emails each look a little bit different. And that's so that our card holders don't assume they've seen the email before. On the right-hand side is the composed email message. On the left is where customers can edit that text. So you can see I have follow-up as needed. That's reflected here. In the body of the email, we'll include all of the transactions that need to be submitted and also a login button to Concur. The idea here is that this gives the cardholder some context as to how much work needs to be done and also the capability to immediately submit that expense report should they have time. Now we'll move forward in the month to what is set as our last reminder in this case, reminder number 4. Now, this is set to go against the accounting deadline. So this is when I want to create my accounting. Typically, this is when I would pay my credit card. So now we're going to take this date, we're going to count backward and send this one 6 days ahead of that deadline. Now, card holders that get to this point that have the 4th reminder have had a few reminders. They have yet to submit all their transactions. So in this case, we're going to copy the card administrator and maybe even blind copy someone. So this is how Carolyn is replicating the cadence that she was doing manually as far as including the right folks at the right time for our email reminders. And now for this reminder, you see it looks quite different. We're using yellow, we have an exclamation point, and we're asking them to urgently do this follow-up. In fact, please take care of this today. Again, we'll summarize those transactions in the body of the email, something that Carolyn was doing manually in her scenario, and we'll include our login button to Concur. All right, now let's fast forward to the end of your first statement period. This is the statement due date. And at this point, you need to pay the credit card bill and deal with the accounting of the unmatched transactions, which are those not yet on a report. You'll click the Initiate Accounting, but before we do, let's take a look at the default for my natural account, which you'll see shortly is 7,000. Whoops, there it is in the upper right. And now we'll just move back over to our Initiate Accounting step and go ahead and click that button. Here, PivotEQ creates an accrual journal entry that accounts for the unmatched transactions. And you'll see that in the top row of my grid here for my 57, 82, 86. Also at this point, PivotEQ uses what we call intelligent accounting to predict extremely accurate accounting for the individual unmatched transactions. So those are the remaining transactions in row 2 and below. Intelligent accounting utilizes context from previous transactions, such as the combination of employee name and merchant. The more transactions that come through, the higher the prediction rates. And you will see right here in this row, I only have one transaction with the natural account of the default of 7,000. In subsequent statement periods, PivotEQ continues to track the unmatched transactions in previous statements. When previously accrued transactions are submitted on an expense report, PivotEQ will create the correcting entries to reverse the accruals so the final accounting can be entered. This concludes the demonstration portion of the webinar. I'm going to hand it back over to you, Karen, and the team for our question and answer period.
Thank you very much. So I'd like to open this up to our attendees to see if you have any questions about PivotEQ. We do have several people from the company ready to answer any questions you may have. And then Cassidy, I sent over a few questions that were emailed to me earlier today that for people who couldn't attend. Would you mind going over those questions? Maybe our attendees would be interested in hearing these questions and answers as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Karen. My name is Cassidy Page. I am also with Pivot Payables. My role formally is our partner engagement manager, which means I work closely with SAP Concur teams. I've also been in customer facing positions. So really glad to be here today. We did get a few questions via email for folks who were not able to attend. So I'll go through those quickly. I think they'll be of great benefit to you. The first question was, can we configure this so the cardholder does not get email reminders? The answer to that is absolutely. Our email reminders are highly customizable. They can be enabled or disabled based on your needs as a company. You can also exclude certain employees from receiving emails. A case where this would be relevant would be perhaps you have an employee who has a card but is not required to submit expense reports. That person could be excluded from receiving email reminders. In addition, you can also decide what email reminders are most appropriate for your teams. Some folks don't need the initial email reminder we went over, but just the latter ones. Some people would like to customize their own. So again, they're remarkably customizable. The second question was, my company does not have a corporate card feed into Concur, but rather we use business cards. Is that supported with PivotEQ? The answer is absolutely. We support any type of card. PivotEQ is card agnostic. It does not matter to us the card issuer. We support corporate and business type programs, and we also support multiple card programs under the same PivotEQ instance. So if you had, for example, an Amex corporate card and some other type of business card, we absolutely can support that level of requirement. That kind of ties right into our last question, which was, I have a mix of card programs, for example, American Express and JP Morgan Chase. Can cards from multiple card issuers be supported in one Pivot configuration? Again, that's absolutely a yes. You would be able to see each card program in the dashboard and then be able to click into them individually. Additionally, each card program has its own set of email reminders and accounting configuration, so you can set those up as needed based on their differences. Looks like we have a couple questions in our chat, so I'll start at the top here. Do you have to manually add the managers for every email, or could you automate that? Denise, feel free to chime in here, but you do set the managers up in the email section, and then as you saw, there are inserts that intelligently feed those pieces in so that every person is getting an individualized custom email.
Yeah, that's correct. So each card program would have its own set of context that could be copied or blind copied. And those are set up once, and then, as Cassidy said, handled as a variable that just becomes a part of that email reminder.
Another question, do all merchant accounts participate with PivotEQ, or how do I find out whether they participate? So when we're making the comparisons and we are leveraging that information to prepare the intelligent accounting that PivotEQ uses for those journal entries, we're receiving the original merchant information from the card transaction in every card transaction, there is embedded information. Among those are the merchant. And then from SAP Concur, we're also receiving that information for those transactions that have come through on approved expense reports. That's among the metrics that we use to complete that reconciliation line by line. One more question we have here. If a transaction is submitted after the deadline, how does the program handle the transaction? The account coding may need to be updated compared to the defaults Pivot decided on previously. This is a great question. So one of the key benefits of PivotEQ is that in addition to creating the accruals for unmatched charges, we track those expenses over time when they are submitted on an expense report, perhaps the following month. We're going to create the correcting entry. The correcting entry can be accessed at any time by going into a past statement. Basically, all the correcting entry does is reverse the accrual. So in answer to your question, Jessica, it is somewhat inconsequential in the long term should that initial prediction not have been quite right, because the final accounting is going to have the correct coding. Our correcting entry is going to exactly reverse the accrual. And then based on that information, our system is going to use intelligent accounting to improve our predictions in the future. So for example, a level of complexity there that our system learns about is not only what account code a particular merchant goes to, but perhaps that merchant in combination with the employee who made that purchase needs to go to a distinct type of account. PivotEQ is going to learn that over time and make better and better predictions. So I hope that answers your question on that. One more question we got. Our current card statement ends the 10th of each month, but obviously we want to use a cutoff at the end of each calendar month for accounting purposes so we can accrue all expenses charged. Does this support that? Yes, so absolutely not all card statements end tidy right on the first of the month, right? You have control in PivotEQ of how you want to control the accounting, basically. And there are a few different options based on how you do your accounting. When you completed your PivotEQ setup with a Pivot resource, they go through those pieces with you as part of the project to set up your accounting based on your own individual needs.
Any more questions, Cassidy?
Not that I can see in our chat. Feel free to pop them in there. Otherwise, I'll pass it back to Denise and Karen.
Okay, thank you. Some really good questions. So again, Pivot Payables is an SAP Concur partner. Whether you're looking for innovative technology, integrations, apps for your travelers, or just ways to streamline, SAP Concur is here to align you with resources. And we wanted to keep this focused on our partner, Pivot Payables. So if you do have any questions or want to discuss anything about SAP Concur, we do have a dedicated toll-free line today and also on our website via chat. And I put these on the slide here. Feel free to reach out to us via these two channels, and we've been more than happy at SAP Concur to answer your questions. Thank you so much for attending today. I hope you all have a great day. And then for all of you that have attended, we will be sending an email with the recording so you can use it as a reference. Thank you.